It's not just that Donald Trump has lost his grip on MAGA. It's that MAGA is self-immolating. It is cannibalizing itself. It is completely splintered and fractured under a criminal and lawless president whose leadership is no longer valued. As Donald Trump moves closer to a lame duck status, as his perverse and immoral positions are acknowledged by even his base. We just saw it up on stage during the Turning Point conference post Charlie Kirk's murder, where right-wing podcaster after right-wing podcaster attacked each other, violating the rule that you don't attack fellow MAGA. That's now off. As Mike Pence, remember him? The vice president Donald Trump wanted to hang. He's now set up a new think tank, and he's picking off Heritage Foundation people. That's the group that developed Project 2025. 70% of the cabinet ties back to Heritage Foundation. Well, Mike Pence is now standing up for small c conservatism, and he wants to bring these people over. While all that is going on, the complete destruction of MAGA and the slip on power, that puts the Department of Justice in a very odd place. See, when you're filled with criminal defense lawyers for Donald Trump who's going to do his bidding, who don't have immunity protection, you may end up being prosecuted yourself when the next administration comes in for all the bad acts that you've done. And we talk about that concept, not as an academic exercise, but as a reality on the Legal AF podcast. And here's a clip. Look at the start of this week, Ben. You've got Donald Trump, who spent 18 minutes yelling at the American voter to effectively get off his lawn. If I keep yelling at you, will you love me more? Will you credit me more for the failed economy? And that combined with all of the other micro distractions that he tries. Let me literally throw my name up on the Kennedy Center. He's going to do the same thing on Reagan National, the airport, I'm sure one day. He's making a coin, a US dollar coin, first time in our entire history, including George Washington saying, no, I'm not a king. I don't want to be on the money. Donald Trump's putting himself on the money. These are all desperate acts of somebody that knows his time is up. And that's what dictators did in building statutes, as you referred to. And we had all those great images of the liberation of these countries where you toppled the statue of a Saddam Hussein or a Stalin or what. And Donald Trump knows his time is short, that his grip on MAGA, there's no more MAGA. It is completely splintered. You've got Elise Stefanik, who was a leader for Donald Trump, not even going to be running for Congress, let alone New York governor. She's resigned. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Nancy Mace is going to do the same thing. This thing, whatever this thing was at Turning Point, that was presided over by Charlie Kirk's widow, with just MAGA attacking each other because they no longer had Charlie Kirk to hold them in place. This Ben Shapiro against Tucker Carlson against this podcaster, and his widow presiding over it, thinking she can anoint the next replacement in MAGA, the next leader of MAGA, as J.D. Vance, while at the same time Donald Trump is destabilizing his own leadership by having Susie Wiles, his chief of staff, go after and deflate J.D. Vance in a wide-ranging Vanity Fair set of interviews, all in the same week. And we haven't even talked about the Department of Justice. I'll leave it on this. I just had Attorney General Rob Bonta, one of the favorites of the Legal AF shows that we do, come on with me yesterday. It's up right now as our first video on Legal AF. And I asked him point blank, are you seeing, normally there's a power imbalance and a informational asymmetry between even the state attorneys general and the Department of Justice, or certainly individual defendants in the Department of Justice. I've done criminal defense work my whole career. And it's always like you have this, this giant leviathan of a government agency that has unlimited budget, unlimited time, and unlimited resources. That's what it used to be. But he confirmed for me that they're seeing the same 10 DOJ lawyers because of the numbers you put up at the beginning of the show. And they're all mentally, emotionally, legal argument bankrupt, morally bankrupt, fatigued, and they're taking full advantage of it because now there's no more asymmetry. If anything, the resources and the creativity and the brain power is all on the attorneys general side, on the ACLU side, on the public interest group side in a way that it never was before, because the Department of Justice is stretched so thin. And now we're seeing the results: the grand juries who don't indict, the juries who dismiss, the judges who roll their eyes effectively when a Department of Justice attorney makes an argument and doesn't believe it and sets evidentiary hearings as a result. This is now the 11 months into the administration. Trump's destabilizing and undermining of the Department of Justice and the rule of law and attacking judges has backfired on him, because now he can't win in the courts because of what he's done.
You know, I have a guilty pleasure I'll confess to. I watched the Jake Paul Anthony Joshua.
Oh, I watched that
fight last night. And the reason I bring it up is that the DOJ right now is Jake Paul, and criminal defense lawyers are Anthony Joshua, just smacking him down. And and it's similar, right? Because after all of the hype and the Fugazi behind it and whatever, these criminal defense attorneys with a smile and glee are now defeating the DOJ in case after case after case, where the DOJ used to have a 95% conviction rate. You're having massive dismissals right now. And let me just read for you this one case that I think is symptomatic, one of what's actually happening here. And the case was called United States versus Butler. Okay, I'm just going to read for you what the magistrate judge recently held. And I want to read it word for word so that I'm not characterizing it a certain way. This is a federal magistrate judge in Washington, D.C., describing what is happening in this case. And this is what they say. They go, "This case is a prime example of recent unprecedented prosecutorial action. Zooming out, for the last several weeks, judges in this district have seen case after case involving unprecedented prosecutorial action. In some cases, prosecutors have elected to pursue charges even after federal grand juries have refused to return an indictment. In others, the government has been charging cases notwithstanding apparent constitutional violations. Most troubling, prosecutors have rushed to charge cases before properly investigating them, resulting in individuals being detained for days, only to have the government voluntarily dismiss the charges against them at early hearings. Prosecutors have also seemingly disregarded the requirement in Rule 5 of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure that the government bring a defendant before a magistrate judge without unnecessary delay. As a result, individuals have been detained for days despite the government having no reason to detain them, and in fact, not seeking to detain them when it is finally brought to the court." And it goes on to say how the government does this over and over again. It goes zooming back into this case. On August 19, 2025, law enforcement arrested and detained Mr. Wilson and Ms. Butler based on their own probable cause determination. On August 21st, 2025, the government filed a complaint charging both Mr. Wilson and Ms. Butler with felony offenses. Indeed, Mr. Wilson and Ms. Butler did not see a judge until the afternoon, the fourth day after their arrest and detention. On August 22nd, 2025, Mr. Wilson and Ms. Butler appeared before the court for their initial appearance. The government agreed to their release on conditions. On August 22nd, 2025, Mr. Wilson and Ms. Butler moved to dismiss the charges in this case. On August 29, 2025, Mr. Wilson and Ms. Butler appeared before the court. The government moved to dismiss the felony charges only a week after bringing them, and then recharged Mr. Wilson and Ms. Butler with misdemeanor violations of the same statute. In response, Mr. Wilson and Ms. Butler requested a speedy trial and moved to dismiss the new charges. These were misdemeanors. The court set a trial date and briefing schedule on the motion to dismiss. But then on September 18th, 2025, the government filed a second motion to dismiss. This time, the government was recharging, it said, defendant Wilson in superior court and decided not to proceed with any prosecution in a federal court. Confusingly, the government moved to dismiss without prejudice. Apparently, the government hoped to keep the door open to recharge a third time. And then it talked about how they then tried to recharge a third time. The government indicated that they objected to this request and would file an objection, but like a glitch in the matrix, it was deja vu. On October 2nd, 2025, the government filed a motion to dismiss for the third time, but this one was with prejudice. The winding path that took to get here makes this no happy ending. The term unprecedented is casually bandied about, but as Judge Supnanan identified, these recent weeks literally have been unprecedented. To contextualize how unprecedented things have been, the undersigned, meaning the federal judge here, had the clerk's office run the numbers. Specifically, the court pulled every motion to dismiss filed by the government in cases charged by complaint for 10 years. The result speaks for themselves. Of over 4,000 cases charged by complaint between 2014 and 2024, the government moved to dismiss less than 20 defendants' cases. In the last 8 weeks, the government has charged 95 cases by criminal complaint, and in that time, the government has moved to dismiss 20 defendants' cases. These numbers further corroborate the judge's concern that prosecutors have rushed to charge cases before properly investigating them, resulting in individuals being detained for days only to have the government voluntarily dismiss the charges at early hearings. The court again reminds the government that the Justice Manual states that the U.S. attorney should only commence prosecution if she believes that the admissible evidence will probably be sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction. This sets forth the long-standing threshold requirement from the principles of federal prosecution that a prosecutor may commence or recommend federal prosecution only if she believes that the person will more likely than not be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt by an unbiased trier of fact, and that the conviction will be upheld on appeal. Michael Popok, I'm sorry I had to read that whole thing, but I thought that by reading it, people can actually hear what these federal judges are saying who are seeing this ridiculous behavior. This while more than 2,900 attorneys have quit the Justice Department or were fired during the first 10 months of this year, about triple the number who depart in a typical year.
The number's actually even higher. It's 5,000 if you add in staff and analysts and paralegals. I've had the Department of Justice Alumni Association people on, and it's not being replaced. It's one thing to say, well, you know, he's got the right, you know, in a non-independent, completely captured Department of Justice to put his own people in. Nobody wants to work for the Department of Justice. The top 20 law schools, the applications are non-existent when it relates to people wanting to work for the Department of Justice or even out of law school. There's a whole generation, whereas in your and my generation, if you wanted to go work in the Department of Justice as a stepping stone to other things in your career, you did the normal thing. You law school, then you did a federal clerkship or two, and then maybe you went out and worked at a law firm for a year or two, and then you hit the Department of Justice and you become a white-collar criminal defense lawyer or something like that. That's gone because there's this whole generation is saying pass on the Department of Justice. They may wait until 2028 when the Democrats return to power, and then they'll be a little bit older, a little bit more wiser, working it out in law firms. The Department of Justice itself is not replacing these people with anybody. That's why the same, as Rob Bonta put it for the Attorney General of California, the same 12 people are showing up all across America in the cases. How many times do I have to see Brent Shumati's name, who's a senior guy at the Department of Justice, signing a brief? It's because there's nobody else. They're gassed. And he said he's seen them in court, Bonta, and they look fatigued and they look tired. And so are their arguments. I mean, we just had a filing that was done by the Department of Justice in a major case that had error after error after error in the first several pages of their filing. And I was like, how could this ever happen? So they're not being replaced. They're doing it on a shoestring. And these are the results you're seeing. Dismissed indictments, juries and grand juries that are not giving them the benefit of the doubt. It used to be when it was, and I've done plenty of cases against the United States of America. And that's how government lawyers identify themselves when they're in court. And it's very awe-inspiring. You know, it's like my little guy over here or my company over here against the United States of America. But now the juries are not giving them the benefit of the doubt. The courts are not giving them the benefit of the presumption of regularity, which you normally get. Like, well, I have to presume the grand jury process was regular and normal. No, you're not presuming that at all. They're saying, tell me about your grand jury process. Who was in there? What was said? Well, what did you do? Did you violate constitutional law when you were doing it? And so Donald Trump's attempt through his former criminal defense lawyers, who you and I are going to talk a lot about tonight, who are still operating as his criminal defense lawyers, in Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, in a way, Stan Woodward, and the rest, are subjecting themselves to criminal prosecution and exposure. I'll just leave it on this. Donald Trump has for himself a get out of jail free card. It's called the immunity decision. We've talked ad nauseum about over the last 3 years. He is not going to get indicted for anything he does in the presidency. I mean, virtually anything that he does. That does not extend, and I can say this with quiet confidence, but even with the MAGA Supreme Court, does not extend to anybody not named Donald Trump or the President of the United States. We're looking at you, Pam Bondi. We're looking at you, Kash Patel. We're looking at you, Todd Blanche. We're looking at you, Stan Woodward. We're looking at you, Stephen Miller. We're looking at you, Russ Vought, who make up effectively the administration on a day-to-day basis, and JD Vance, whatever. There have been, and there will be again, attorneys general who have been prosecuted and convicted and jailed, such as Richard Nixon's attorney general during the Watergate cover-up, which seems like preschool compared to the criminality that's on full display and obstruction of justice with this Department of Justice and Donald Trump. Once he announced that he was the chief legal officer, not Pam Bondi, that the Department of Justice was no longer independent. Nothing was independent in the executive branch, and the FBI was not independent. Then all the people that are now working for him and doing his bidding have tremendous targets on their back, which it's amazing to me that they don't seem to recognize. Because if you and I went somehow on that side of the aisle, decided to go in with this administration and throw our lot in and become, as Todd Blanche said, why did I turn? I wasn't going to turn the criminal cases down. Look where I am now. I may be the attorney general one day. Right, but at tremendous risk to your livelihood and to your liberty. If I got in there and I was like, holy crap, this is what I got to do is this at this position, I would resign. I am shocked that there are not, besides Dan Bongino, that there are not more resignations at the top level with a recognition of criminal exposure.
Right. It is like the old Aesop fables or the parables of yesteryear. Like, you make a wish on the magic lamp for infinite wealth and infinite power, but at what cost and expense? I mean, it literally follows almost in a way that seems parody, but that's the world that we are living in. I mean, you have people like Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche and Pete Hegseth and others, and in their quest for power, they've created all this exposure, and the dystopian realization you come up with is that if there's any logical thinking going on in these people, their futures only exist in a world where there is no democracy, right? Their futures are tethered to a bet, putting all those chips on whatever it is, red or black or double
Red.
zero or snake, whatever, right? That, depending on what you believe the odds are, that there won't be democracy, because if in the future the pendulum swings back, and that's what usually happens, and where there's pendulum swings like this that go so much against the interest of the people, when that pendulum swings back towards law and order, you better believe that a community that wants to see our institutions restored are going to be looking at the people who were the facilitators, who were the aiders and abettors of this, who were the co-conspirators. That's where this, I think, is going to head. And I think that you will see a as Trump gets less and less popular by the day, and is, it's already the least popular in like presidential history. I think you're going to see a very popular desire to make sure war criminals are put on war tribunals, and these people could be charged with murder. I mean, and I think that it's going to be a prerequisite, frankly, for any Democrat running for president to speak with that level of clarity. We've got a lot to discuss because this regime is covering up a child sex trafficking ring. They are now co-conspirators. If they weren't before, they're certainly now co-conspirators in a child sex trafficking ring before our eyes. It's not hyperbolic to say that. Congress passed a law. Heck, Donald Trump signed the thing, but he signed it knowing that he's going to violate any laws that exist and just claim national security or this or that to try to get that absolute immunity from what the Supreme Court did a few years back when they betrayed our Constitution in its most pure sense imaginable, and right now violated the Epstein Transparency Act. And they did it and basically gave the middle finger to the American people, but worse, re-traumatizing the victims and the survivors who waited for that day and were re-victimized by these perpetrators.
Welcome back. First, thank you all for helping to get Legal AF, the YouTube channel, to 1 million free subscribers. We did it this weekend, and thank you for that. Legal AF, the podcast, is the basis of our brand. Ben Meiselas and I formed that 5.5 years ago. Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time is the podcast. Catch us on YouTube. Catch us on the Apple and Spotify audio platforms. With your help, we stay atop the rankings, top 20 to 30, depending upon the week in YouTube rankings, top 50 to 100, depending upon the week in Apple rankings. It all matters. It grows the channel, grows our community, gets us ready for the all-important 2026. So take a moment, make sure you're subscribed. There's a link below for Legal AF YouTube channel. Till my next report, I'm Michael Popak. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.